Now you will experience the full power of the dark side.
This is the backstory of His Highness Galactic Emperor Sheev Palpatine, also known as Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Sidious, previous Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic and Senator from Naboo. Before I begin, I submit to you, Star Wars fans, and to any Disney executives who may be surreptitiously viewing, that the 9-movie saga is, as of now, incomplete. The saga, in fact, should be 12 movies, to encompass Star Wars' most iconic characters' rise to prominence, a prequel to the prequels, if you will. More on that later. And as a disclaimer for those who have been living under a rock for the past 40 years, this video does contain spoilers for Star Wars Episodes 1 through 9. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the folks over at Wikipedia, who have compiled the bulk of the information featured in this video. In the description, I've posted a link to their website, which is perhaps the most comprehensive collection of Star Wars universe knowledge available publicly. All of the information contained within is canon as of 2020. I won't be discussing any Legends information in this video. Star Wars fans, both dedicated and casual, know Palpatine, or simply the Emperor, as the most iconic cinema villain of all time. But his reach in the Star Wars franchise goes well beyond 6 of the 9 saga movies, which, by the way, makes him the most prominent and omnipresent character in the entire saga. He is featured in all sorts of Star Wars media, ranging from comic books, to cartoons, to video games, and novels. However, due to the limitations of the timeline of the movies, which take place from Anakin Skywalker's childhood until the death of his grandson Ben Solo, dedicated movie viewers who don't consume other forms of Star Wars media are left with question marks surrounding Palpatine's origins. So let's get right to it. As movie viewers know, Sheev Palpatine is a Dark Lord of the Sith whose story arc spans from Episodes 1 through 9. Beginning as Senator of Naboo, Palpatine rises to prominence during the Republic's conflict with the Trade Federation, being elected as Supreme Chancellor in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. As the result of a conflict he is ultimately responsible for manufacturing. In Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Chancellor Palpatine expands his powers by manipulating Senator Jar Jar Binks to propose a vote to grant him emergency powers, where the successful vote results in authorization of the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic, known colloquially as the Clone Army. Ultimately, as we all know, he finally unmasks himself in Revenge of the Sith as the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Sidious. By then, it's too late. The Jedi's attempts to halt the corruption of the Republic and save democracy have failed, and Palpatine uses what he calls the Jedi attempt on his life as an excuse to extinguish any semblance of democracy and reorganize the Republic into the first Galactic Empire, making himself the first and sole Galactic Emperor. Throughout the original trilogy, which takes place 19 years after the prequel trilogy, Palpatine continues to serve as Galactic Emperor until he is struck down by his apprentice, Lord Vader, and dies in the core of the second Death Star. Or does he? As viewers have known since the prequel trilogy, Palpatine is a master of 7-dimensional chess, and he ultimately had a contingency plan. Revived by the Sith Eternal on Exegol in Episode 9 using unnatural, ancient Sith powers and high technology, the Emperor returns as a Frankenstein-like demigod, masterminding the creation of the Sith Eternal Fleet, composed of hundreds of the Final Order's Zistan-class Star Destroyers. Ultimately defeated by his granddaughter, Palpatine extinguishes himself with his own Sith lightning. Or at least that's what we're left to think, for now. But that's the gist of what we know from the movies. The non-cinema canon material gives us other clues. This is what we know about the Emperor prior to the movies. Sheev Palpatine was born 84 years before the Battle of Yavin, BBY, on Naboo, a planet featured heavily in the prequel series as home of Padme Amidala and the Gungan species, made famous, or infamous as the case may be, by the beloved Jar Jar Binks. Naboo, a planet so bountiful and picturesque, once elicited a remark from Anakin Skywalker that if he'd grown up there, he didn't think he'd ever leave. Located in the galaxy's mid-rim, Naboo is relatively close to Tatooine, which viewers know as the desert-like home planet of Anakin and Luke Skywalker, originally featured in A New Hope and The Phantom Menace. Born to an influential family on Naboo, Palpatine eventually met Darth Plagueis, becoming Sith apprentice Darth Sidious under Plagueis' tutelage. A prolific student, Darth Sidious learned the capabilities of the dark side of the Force, absorbing the knowledge and skill of generations of Sith, spanning all the way back to Darth Bane. As many viewers know, 2,000 years before the Skywalker saga takes place, the Sith once ruled the galaxy. Overthrown by the Jedi and cast into the darkness, the Sith long conspired to restore their former glory. Palpatine would eventually become the agent of their supremacy. We first learn of Darth Plagueis in Revenge of the Sith when Supreme Chancellor Palpatine sits down with Anakin at a performance of Squid Lake at the galaxy's Opera House. Palpatine tells Anakin the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, thus introducing us to who would eventually be revealed as Darth Sidious's former master. As apprentice, Darth Sidious supposedly learned that Plagueis had discovered the secret to eternal life by manipulating the midichlorians themselves to prevent people from dying. Plagueis explains to Palpatine that if they work together in accordance with the Sith rule of two, with one of them serving as a bait for the dark side of the Force, and the other as a vessel, they could acquire the ability to harness the dark side and rule immortal for 10,000 years. Sidious later admits, however, that he had never been able to learn Plagueis' secret of immortality, although this admission is now thrown into question given what we know about the events of Episode 9, wherein Palpatine returns from what had previously been regarded as his certain demise in the core of the second Death Star. While learning the dark side of the Force, Palpatine publicly becomes involved in politics, eventually securing Naboo's Senate seat in the Galactic Senate, thus beginning the trajectory of his rise to galactic prominence. Meanwhile, after learning all that he could from Darth Plagueis, Sidious ultimately killed Plagueis because the Sith rule of two mandated that only two Sith, a master and an apprentice, could exist at any given time. As Senator of Naboo, Palpatine joins Chancellor Skor Kalpana's ruling party. Kalpana was the predecessor of the weak and ineffective Chancellor Finis Valorum, featured in The Phantom Menace. It is while a member of Kalpana's party that Palpatine notices the corruption, discontent, and indecision rampant in the Galactic Republic, and ultimately hatches his scheme to manipulate those shortcomings, to throw the galaxy into turmoil and war. It is also during this time that he forms ties to some of his future allies, such as Wilhuff Tarkin, known to audiences as Grand Moff Tarkin and commander of the original Death Star. The two had originally met when Sidious was an apprentice to Darth Plagueis, and Tarkin was a cadet at the Sullust Sector Spacefarers Academy, a piloted academy which was located on the planet Sullust in the Outer Rim territories, between Bespin and Hoth, Naboo, and Dagobah. Many cadets of the Academy, including Tarkin, eventually went on to join the Department of Justice of the Galactic Republic, also known as the Judicial Department, a precursor of sorts to what was to become the Grand Army of the Republic. It was Palpatine who ultimately convinced the younger Tarkin to join the Judicial Department, but also advised him to consider a political career, which Tarkin eventually did, becoming governor of Eriadu, a planet located in the Outer Rim. The relationship between the two grew over time, with Palpatine commending Tarkin for his accomplishments and encouraging Tarkin's ambition by assuring him that despite their upbringing on planets near the edge of the galaxy, the two of them would have futures of great consequence in the grand scheme of things. As we all know now, this could not have been more true. While in the Senate, Sidious prepares to carry to fruition the Sith's plan to destroy the Galactic Republic and replace it with a new Sith Empire, while simultaneously eradicating the Jedi Order. Seeking a new apprentice to help facilitate his grand design, Sidious travels to the planet Dathomir, home of the Rancor, the species famously featured in Jabba the Hutt's pit below his palace court in Return of the Jedi. On Dathomir, Sidious meets Mother Talzin, a Dathomirian Night Sister. The Night Sisters, sometimes referred to as the Witches of Dathomir, were an order of magic-using women who were able to perform arcane, dark side magic which flowed from the depths of their planet. Promising to make Talzin his apprentice, Sidious learned the magic and abilities of the Night Sisters, intermingling this power with his own dark side abilities. Of course, as viewers well know, a deal with Sidious only goes one direction, and the Dark Lord eventually betrayed Talzin and stole her son, who would eventually become Darth Maul, the primary antagonist of the Phantom Menace. Eventually, Palpatine trains Darth Maul to be a living weapon of the Sith in order to facilitate his ultimate plan to crush the Republic's political apparatus and annihilate the Jedi. From a timeline perspective, it should be noted that it was while Darth Plagueis was still alive that Sidious captured Maul from Dathomir. Palpatine also manipulated the affairs of the Trade Federation to facilitate Newt Gunray's rise to the position of Viceroy of the Trade Federation. Eventually, Gunray would play a central role in the Naboo crisis, the main catalyst for the chain of events manufactured by Lord Sidious that ultimately led to the downfall of the Republic. Meanwhile, Sidious becomes acquainted with Jedi Master Count Dooku, who eventually becomes a prominent Sith Lord who is featured in the prequel trilogy. A great mind and one of the most revered masters of the Jedi Order, Count Dooku, also attuned to the politics of the Republic, became disaffected and appalled by the corruption running rampant throughout the Republic. Sidious manipulates Dooku's discontent to lure Dooku to the dark side, minting the former Jedi Master as Darth Tyrannus, and ultimately using him as a disposable cog in the machinery of Sidious's ultimate design. While the new canon post-Disney acquisition leaves us with few other details about Palpatine's origin, The Rise of Skywalker did provide us with the interesting detail that Palpatine, at some point, fathered a son, who would eventually himself become Rey Palpatine's father. Palpatine's son wanted nothing to do with the Emperor, and he and his wife eventually settled into a simple life as junk traders. After Rey's birth, the couple become terrified that the Emperor would seek Rey out. As such, Rey was hidden away on the planet of Jakku, a remote desert planet located in the galaxy's inner rim, between Coruscant and Endor. It is on Jakku where The Force Awakens begins. All of this culminates in Palpatine's eventual rule as Galactic Emperor and his return as ruler of the Sith Eternal's Final Order, which leads to the ultimate and final battle of the Sith versus the Jedi, when a reinvigorated Sidious stares down his own granddaughter for that fateful final moment. Throughout the entire Skywalker saga, the Emperor stands not merely as a man, but more appropriately regarded as a force of nature, a legend, even a demigod. His presence captivates audiences as Ian McDiarmid masterfully portrays him as the face and force of pure, unadulterated evil itself. While Darth Vader was seen as the original big bad of Star Wars, as the original trilogy developed, audiences learned that he was merely an agent of something far more insidious. With the inception of the prequel trilogy, and finally as the sequel trilogy concludes, it becomes clear that ultimately, the most important figure of the saga is the Emperor himself. His story is the glue that holds together the entire saga, from beginning to end. This fact becoming even more obvious now that we know that, though he was not present for episodes 7 and 8, he was once again behind the events and the design of what occurred, just as in the original trilogy and in the prequels. Even Snoke was a creation of the Emperor's. Everything that transpired in the sequel trilogy did so according to his design. Up until the end, at least. Or so we think, as of now. However, given what little we know of Palpatine's life as a child, of his family, and of the events leading up to the Phantom Menace, I return to my original point, which is that the Skywalker saga is not complete without the tale of its most iconic and influential character. The missing piece to this puzzle is the prequel to the prequels, another trilogy that would follow Palpatine from his childhood up to the events of the Phantom Menace. That trilogy could provide audiences with a compelling backstory that would explain the events and circumstances that led to Palpatine's embracing the dark side of the Force as a young man. The missing 3 movies would fill in the blanks and also give audiences a look at some of the iconic characters mentioned in the saga, but never shown to the audience in the film format. Characters such as Darth Plagueis and Mother Talzin, who is featured in the Clone Wars series. It also would provide a glimpse into the Jedi Order before the prequels, and could feature Yoda and other masters such as Mace Windu and their affairs. With skilled writers, a coherent plan for the trilogy, and a competent director, Disney has another opportunity to engage in something truly special, and potentially incredibly lucrative. Additionally, with actors such as Ian McDiarmid and Samuel L. Jackson still performing, Disney could take advantage of the de-aging technology used in The Irishman to feature these original actors in the new trilogy, if they were to begin work on such a concept immediately. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to learn about Palpatine's backstory. I truly hope that Disney will take the opportunity to expand on his origin story and provide audiences, preferably on film but also potentially in other forms of media, a glimpse into his past and of the life and times of Darth Plagueis. Until next time, may the Force serve you well.